Hi everyone. Today I will be kind of um, doing an installation of LDAP. So this is going to be Open LDAP on Linux. So we're going to see how we can create, set up an LDAP server, and then also install Postgres and see how we can create users in the LDAP server, and then the Postgres users will get authenticated from LDAP. But this basically is just going to be on running on Linux. So we're gonna go start right away. Uh, Without wasting much of the time. So first things first. As you can see here, I have two servers for this three servers for this demo. So basically, I'm going to be using this as my LDAP server, 180, and then this other second server here is going to be where I will install um, EPAS, that is Enterprise Postgres. So basically, this is where I will have Postgres running. And I will have a client server where I would kind of try to test my connection, which will authenticate from the LDAP server and then connect me over here. But I will do the same. One side I can connect directly from to the database on the same server. So these are the three servers here. Um, this 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 is the other server. So this is the EPAS server, and this is the client here. So basically, these servers, we don't have anything running on any of these servers. So we're going to just start right away because don't want to have it too long so that you don't get bored. Okay. So in order to get to install Open LDAP, we need to make sure we get the packages installed first. That's what we're going to do now. So we're going to run yum install Open LDAP. We're going to both install both of them, both the client packages. Oh, I need to be as a root user. So, hmm, why is it doing that? We should install. Okay, the installation is running. Um, so when that installs, it should install us Open LDAP. Okay, that is done. So the service to start up that package will be called slapd. So we are going to enable, we're going to start up the package first, start up the service, which is slapd, which needs to be running. So that is started. If we check the status of that, it should be running. Yeah. Okay. So it shows it's running. So the next thing is we will need just to enable it so that in case the server goes down and it comes back up, the service should automatically start running. So so this is our LDAP server. So all this configuration we're doing now will just be for our LDAP server. Okay, the next thing we will do here is we will need to create a password. We need to create a password for that LDAP server. So we'll use a slap passwd, which will create a password. So we'll give a password here and we'll provide the extra password. So when you do that, it's going to create some sort of a hash here, and we need to keep this. It's very important when you're configuring the LDAP database, you need this. So you need to keep this in a secure location. So if you're doing this configuration, you can copy that and keep it somewhere. We'll use it when time comes. Okay. All right. So when we do this installation of LDAP server, there are a couple of files which get created. So if we try to look into this directory, open LDAPD, we will see these two files. This is also a directory, and we'll see this file. We're going to see how we get to use that. So in order for us to jump into modifying some of the objects, basically what it does is that you can see that the extension of this file is LDIF. So that is just an LDAP extension. Um, and most of the files, most of the changes that we are going to be making, we're just going to put it in files, and we're going um, to have them in that particular extension. So remember that when you're using LDAP, LDAP is kind of just a centralized, it's just kind of a centralized location whereby you can create your users there, and then they can have access to your services. So each user or each application, needs to authenticate there. So we need some sort of an LDAP database which will actually house all those users that you create. So if we try to cd into this location we have here, um, this this oops, let me just cd in here. Sorry. So if I cd in here, if we look, we see that, and oh, sorry. So we're going to see a couple of files here, and we're going to modify them, especially this file with some permissions, and we're going to look. This is the file we're going to really configure to add users into the LDAP database. So we're going to start first by creating a configuration file, because if we have to edit that file, we can use a couple of different command line. We can use a command line called LDAP modify to modify that file. So what we're going to do right away is to create a file, and we're going to edit that file. So here, if we're going to create a file called my vi myconfig.ldif, and we're just gonna modify that file from an existing configuration which I did. Here we're just gonna change this to hub2 because that is our domain we're using, and it was hub2.org, and we're going to do the same here. I'm gonna put this to .org. Oops, that is not all. And we're gonna change this to hub2, and I think that should be fine for that file there. So just go ahead and save this file. So after saving that file, remember that even before running doing all these configurations, there are default. If we want to see the default configuration that exists there, I run Ldap Search to look at what is in the database. To pull out everything that's there, we're going to see just default information that is there. This is just default stuff that's there. So what I'm doing is that I modified that file in order to actually set my domain controllers and all of that. So in order to push the modifications which I just did, which I just modified here, my LDAP config. I didn't want to actually do this here. Let me just copy this file. Let me just copy this file to slash. I don't want to leave it here. It will. Let me see. Let me just push it to the home directory. Okay, we're in /root. Let me just create a path here, LDAP files, and let me cd to that location. and I can copy this particular file I just put here because I don't want it to be there. I want to be in these locations I already have. Okay, so that should be fine. So we here now. We have this file. So in order for us to apply that particular file, we will need to run the LDAP modifier I talked to you earlier, and then we will provide the file we have already. It says no such file. Let's see. Oops, I made a mistake with that file. It wasn't. It's supposed to be DIF. Okay. So we can run that modify, and it says modifying file. It has modified the entry. So if we look at the LDAP search we ran earlier on, we will see that the modifications have been made. If we run this, we're going to see that we got some modifications made here, but earlier on it was not there. All right, let's move ahead. So let's try to add. Now, this is where we will need the password which we did earlier on. So note that the modifications I'm doing here using LDAP modify, you can still do it as well using command line tool. Okay, LDAP config 2.ldif. So this I will need to pass that password. So right here, I will need to pass the password which we had earlier. So you need, this is where you have to change that password. So if you kept the password, you need to make sure you get that same password. So that's what we're going to replace here. So we replace that, and I think we should be fine here. So we're saying that we want to modify that file. Yeah, that's fine. So we can save this file. So after saving this file, we can run again the LDAP modifier and parse the file itself, the same file, LDAP diff. Yeah. So it says modified, it has modified everything. And the next thing we are going to do is that we have to allow access to LDAP database to the admin user, right? So in order to do that, we will need to actually create another file again, all right? And we will put the modifications we want in there because we need to allow access. So let's create MI3, and we will need to run this. Hold on. I hope I've not made an error here. Oh, uh, I didn't press insert earlier, so I got some lines mixed up. So we're going to change this as per our settings. And here we're going to put the same hub2 log. We say it's going to be read by that base, and then we're going to specify the UID. Say we modify, and then we should be fine. That we can save that file. And the next thing we run our LDAP modify to modify that file. So the modifications have been made. So if you want to validate, if you want to validate a new attribute, you can always do that by running the same command we ran earlier on to see, check our database. You could see that everything has been modified, the password added, and everything that we've done so far, which everything looks good at this point. So if you want to manually add objects, to LDAP, we can as well do that. Um, so we need to create an entry. So the easiest way would be to just use the LDAP file as we've been doing earlier on. So what we're going to do is that we're going to create we're going to create and define first, you know, our distinguished names and domain controllers and all of that stuff. So we're going to create another. I'm just gonna call it hop2 since we're using hop2 DIF LDIF, and we're going to modify this. I'm going to call it hop2, and the same thing here. I'm going to call it hop2, and the same thing here. I'm going to call it hop2. Oh, it's going to say org. That should be it. You can save this file. And after saving that file. Now, in this case, in order to parse that, we will need to run um, so in order to parse this, we will need to execute Ldap add, not Ldap modify we did last time. So we need to specify that we need to use another command line, which is called Ldap add. Okay. And then here, what we're going to see is that we're going to specify the password. And this is just basic password I'm putting here, not making it this, since this is just a demo I'm doing here. Hop2, and we will have to parse the file which we just did here, which is hop2. So we specify that file, we specify admin, specify distinguished names and all of that. And we see the new entry has been added. So if we want to really see that these entries have been added, we can still perform an Ldap search. And in this case, we'll use our same attribute we have earlier. So if we do that, we'll be able to see that everything is looking okay. Now, the next thing we're going to do is add an organizational unit. Now, organizational unit, for some of you who know already, maybe Active Directories in Windows, is quite the same thing. So just the kind of way of organizing, or maybe you're creating users, you want to kind of make sure everything, you don't have everything split out everywhere. So we're going to create an organizational unit, and in this sense, we're going to call that organizational unit, we're going to call it users. So the same thing we've been doing already. We're going to create an LDIF file for that. And we're just going to leave everything there as it is. We're going to call the organizational unit users. So we're going to create all our users in that unit. And we're going to specify hop2 here, and we're going to specify that. So we save that file, and then we use the same Ldap add that we've been running earlier on. I think we ran that. We can just call that up, and then here we just parse our file, which is user, or user without an S. So we pass the same file, and that has been added. And now if we want to add a user, if we want to add a user, what we can do is we'll also need to create another file. Um, So we can also create another file for that. So in this case, we're just gonna add a user called Benson. So I'm just gonna call it benson.ldf, and then I'm just gonna leave that file like this. So I specify the UID Benson, I specify the password, and everything other every other thing looks the same. So I'm gonna save that. I'm really kind of trying to get really fast here and not going into too much details of a lot of stuff because this is just showing a demo to people because I got a request from someone who already who needs to see this, so already has an idea of some of these some of the stuff we have in files here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass that same file as we already as we've been doing earlier. We'll use the Ldap Add, and we will add that file, add that user. Sorry. So this is something we're going to see here that it is going to fail, and it just means that there's a particular file that has not been loaded in the core schema. um, First, what we're going to what we and that's the reason why we're having this error here, because that file has not been loaded. So what we're going to do first is to load that file. All right, and it's basically an init person. Um, that file is actually found in this location. I'm gonna show you here. Just a minute. So it's in the same path that we had earlier on. Um, where we had the open LDAP. So if I try to list this location, mm, we're going to see a couple of LDAP files here in this directory. So this file needs to be loaded. Yeah, this file needs to be loaded. So it defines user. So we need to load that file first. So since the file is already there, we're going to do a normal LDAP add, and we'll do everything as normal, and we'll specify that file. So, so again, in order to add this file, it's still giving me an error. And the reason why it's giving me an error to add this file is because the attribute type auto isn't defined. So what we're going to define, we're going to define that file. And there is another file that needs to be loaded before this one, and that file is the cosine LDF. So you see, it's kind of just wrapping up the same and the same thing. So let's go ahead first and load up that cosine file. So that's what we're going to do. We load that file first. So since the file is loaded, and then we can call up our init person file, this one, and then we load it now. It's now loaded. So with that file loaded now, um, um, we also need to add an NIS file. There are actually three of them, this one. So we need to add up this file too as well. Okay, so nice. Let's just go ahead and add that one. Nice. So that has been added. So with this added now, let's go ahead and add our normal user that we had to add before. So this is where we had to add the user. So if we do this, we see now that the user has been added. So there are quite of a couple of different files that need to be loaded before we can go through that process of adding that file. So now we might want to see just to make sure that everything is looking fine. So we can use this command, the slap cut, to cut that schema config and check on the configurations. So that can show us, most of the things that we've already done earlier on, all the things we've defined so far. So it's kind of really, little bit long. So now, even though we have created a user, we need the user to be in a group, right? We also need to create groups. So at this point, what we can do is to create groups. We can create one group, multiple group, but in this sense, we're just going to create one group. At the same time, also we create a file for that. Um, so uh, creating a group is just basically going to be um, defining. Oh, sorry, kind of having. So creating a group just basically just kind of putting the same that user and I'm specifying the organizational unit and everything. And I can change um, uh, this EDB support, which I just is just what I define here. But earlier on I defined I kind of I think I should just make that to be the same. Um, I think I should just make that to be the same. Just give me a minute. Um, when I was creating that user, we had the user assigned to be as EDB. I'm just gonna put that to be as EDB since that's what I defined earlier on. Um, okay, so yeah, so you can have different, you can specify different ones if you wish, but that's fine. I just want to make it keep it the same. Okay, so now that we have those groups, what we can do is to run our Ldap add as usual. So we specify that, and then we can go ahead to add it. So it is added our entry. Okay, with our entry added, uh, we should be good at this point with the Ldap server. What we can do next is this should be good for Ldap server actually. Um, so one of the things which you might want to do now is since we've had the Ldap server already set up, we can we can actually configure TLS um, so that our client server should be able to authenticate. We can create some TLS certificate to enable, a secure communication between the LDAP client and the LDAP server. So in order to create that authentication to allow the client to be able to authenticate, we will need to do some configuration at the level of TLS. So in this case, what we will do first is we're going to install Open Ssl. So So we're going to install Open Ssl. We just do a yum install Open Ssl. So we just run yum install Open Ssl. So this should just get Open Ssl installed first. So with Open Ssl installed, we're going to create a private key. So use Open Ssl, create a private key. So we're going to put a passphrase, and we're going to repeat that. So that should be fine. And we'll go now. What we need to do is to create a CA. So create a CA certificate authority. Okay, and when creating the CA, we're going to pass our private key, which we did earlier on, and we call it this. Okay, we put our passphrase. And no, creating a certificate, you will need to put country and maybe your location, because this is just a private certificate I'm creating. So I'll need to specify a whole lot of stuff. I'm in the US, and then I put my state, Maryland, and then city, and put Germantown, and then organization. I'm just gonna put Benson Limited. Just anything, But this if this is your company stuff, then you you might have certificates already. So here I need to put my server's host name, and here you need to be careful and make sure that you actually put the name of your server itself, your server. So I'm gonna make sure I put the same server name which I have here of this same server, the host name of this server. Email address, I'm just gonna put any email address I have here at gmail.com. That should be fine. Okay. So with that created, we need to configure OpenSSL Xgraph extension to use to create SAN certificates. Now, the reason for this SAN certificate is to avoid creating multiple certificates for each of our LDAP client. Right, that's just basically what SAN certificate is. Since we've created a certificate, at some point you might need to create multiple certificate for different clients. So we just want to use one. So that's the reason why we will just use a SAN certificate. Okay. So we can go ahead and create a file for that. I just call it, you can call it any name. And what I'm just going to do is to put all the information inside and to relate my, sorry, I don't know why for some reason I always just um, specify, oh, sorry, I should have deleted this in a better way than doing all this long process. Okay. So what I've done here is that you can actually specify under this out, you can specify the different servers that might need to use this certificate in here. All right. If you want to line them up, you can as well. So since it's just so that I can have a SAN certificate here. Create a SAN certificate here. So with that created, I need to generate the LDAP client key. So so to generate my LDAP client key, I will generate my LDAP client key. The key has been generated. Then I will create my certificate signing request, my CSR. Okay. I will need to create my CSR. So I need to create my CSR and then I parse it and then I give it this name. I call it CSR. And then I'm going to use the same information I already did earlier on to specify that. And okay, see, Town organization. I'm going to put Benson. Need that. I'm just going to repeat the same thing. Host name. I'm going to use same host name here. Same host name. Email address. Yeah. I had an email address earlier. Gmail.com. Challenge password. Um, you might want to pull it. You might want to leave it as it is. But let me just go ahead and put something here. I'm just going to put Postgres. But no, it's not like it's. This is just a demo, okay? So these are just basic values I have here, not anything that has to compromise security. So, all right. Okay, so what next? Next thing is we are going to create the Ldap Client certificate, right? Actual Ldap Client certificate, which we will need to create that right now. Okay, and if you look at it carefully here at this command, you will see that we're actually passing that file which we want to create the SAN certificate. So it's basically going to use this file to create our client certificate, and it's going to make it known as a SAN certificate. Put my passphrase. I think, yeah, that should be good. And if we list this, everything is being created in here, okay? You could see SCRT, you could see that we have a file there, okay? Everything is in that folder, but we're gonna move them. So you might want to verify the LDAP client certificate, right? You might want to verify to make sure that everything looks good. So you might want to can use this command to verify. So it would display a whole lot of information. So everything looks to be fine. Okay. Okay, and then at this point, we will need to move those certificates to the actual location. So we'll need to copy, we're just copying. So we will need to copy this file and this file to that location. So that has been copied over there. And we will also need to copy our actual certificates file as well. So copy that same file to that location. That should be fine. So if we want to make sure everything is looking okay and everything is working as expected, uh, uh, okay. Let's see. I want to see something. Okay. So securing Ldap protocol. So sometimes you might want to make sure that everything is looking secure as it is. So we can see that. Since we're using CentOS 7, it's they are already building values for TLS related attributes. So you could see that by using this lab cat. So now that we have everything, we have to modify the values. There's certain values in that file, in the file we had earlier on. So we need to modify those values and pass those certificates there. I don't know if I can go as way back as possible where we had a LDAP search. I don't know if I can see that. Okay, let me see. Let's see. Mm, we have to modify the couple of, yeah, so we have to add it here anyway. Yeah. So in order to do that, we will need to create just a TLS file in order to modify that database to use TLS. So, so we have to just VI, and we can add, we can now add the location of those files which we just copied earlier on. Okay. So here we're going to put it in this format. So we're going to specify this file and then we'll add those files as we copy them to that location. All right, you can save this file. Everything should be okay. And the next thing is we'll need to change the location because there is a user. If you look at this here, we have a user. Oh, sorry. Uh, we have a user here called Ldap, and we'll need to make this user to on that location where we have the certificate. So we need to just change that location for that user there. And we will need to use our normal LDAP modify to now add, as we already created that file earlier on, right? So this is the file we created. So we need to add that file. Okay. So that has added the file. That should be fine. So after that file has been added, um, the next thing is that we might need to add an attribute as well, um, an attribute for those certificate file. So in order for us to add an attribute for those certificate files, we will need to also create another TLS RDF file. So let's just VI is the same. Let's say we have the same file which we have here. I can just put this to 1. Okay. And I use this. So look at it here. I'm actually passing the other file. So which is okay. So next I will now modify to add that file. So I've added that. That should be fine. So now we can validate to make sure that everything is fine. Remember earlier on we validated and we saw 2 files here. Oh, we're way far away. Oops, looks like. So remember we validated here. If we use this same command, we validated earlier and we saw 2. So I think if we run that again, we should see 3. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. So at this point, what we can do is that we need to make LDAP to be aware that this connection needs to be a secure connection. All right. So we need to open the ldap.com file and we need to add an entry in there. So we need to open up the ldap.com file and what we're going to do is that we need to we need to add, okay, we need to add the location of the certificate that we already have here. Okay, so here we need to add our TLS set location. Okay, so we need to just, oh, sorry, I think we can just type that in. We need to add TLS, we just call it custard, and we know already the location where it is. It is in open LDAP location, and it's insert. Yeah, should be insert. I think that should be insert, and the file that is there has the extension. Remember, we put .pm. Yeah, and you need to make sure everything is it's looking good the way it should be, because any slight error or mistake, you know, you run into issues here. Okay, we save that file. Now, so since we're using self-signed certificates, it is important to specify the CL location, and and as I've mentioned earlier, you need to make sure that it's it's correct. I just have to specify it in that file. You need to make sure it's correct. So after specifying that, um, the next thing we have to do is, I think we will need to, oh yeah, there's something we skipped. We will need to also remember, I was saying that we need to make LDAP know this thing is secure. So we need to open the slap D, and we need to add something here. We will need to add here, since you see here it's not supporting LDAP secure, so we need to add LDAP secure right there. So we can add the same this, but we'll make it secure. So we're just gonna add the same thing, but here we're gonna put an S here, which means we're saying that it should be secure. So with that in place, we save this file. So after saving that file, we will need to stop and start that service. Very important. Or you can just restart the service. You can just restart the service, and let's make sure it's running. So that I'll make sure it's stopped, and then okay, everything is looking good. Okay, so at this point we can try to validate our TLS connectivity and make sure everything is looking okay, and we can do that by using Ldap Search and parsing uh, this ZZ option. So here we could see um, it kind of just did a little search, and it returned us 3, and yeah, I think that should be fine. That should be fine. Yeah. So now at this point, we should be okay with the LDAP server. The LDAP server should be fine. So we're going to move ahead to our client, our LDAP client. Okay. So let's go to the Ldap client, to our database, but we will initially just use that as a client for now. So we're going to install the Postgres database here as well. So let's just switch as root. Oh, why is it taking so long? Maybe I made an error. Let me see. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so basically the first thing we have to do is to install LDAP packages, the client packages. And these client packages we'll need to run this to install. Now we're going to be using altconfig, and we'll talk about that a little later. And we'll install SSSD, and all these it's going to help us in order to set up LDAP. So note that there are other different packages which could be used there. So um, if we're using auth-config, then we will need to use this system security service daemon. And then we also need to install oddjob. So oddjob here is just basically because note that you're going to be connecting as a user that is in a different server. The user will be in this LDAP server. And since you're going to be connecting from another different server, then note that there is going to be a home location for that user which needs to be created on that particular server. And we're gonna see that in action, and that's the reason why we are having this a job home DR there. So we're going to install these packages on this server. I don't know why for some reason it does this in the first install. Okay, it should install those packages there. Um, so just give it a little minute. Those packages to be installed. So when this package is finished installation, we will need to copy a certificate file from from our from our server into this location. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this file I'm copying it from the LDAP server. What am I copying? I'm copying this cert, and I'm bringing it into this server to this location. All right. So I'll put my password. Looks like it's an issue here. It's a directory. What is that? Let's see why it's saying that. Oh yeah, it created this as this location. So anyway, let's just first of all put it in here. Okay. So okay, that is copied. Now, configuring a client system to use LDAP directory for user authentication is easy. We can use some command line utilities as well as we can use a GUI. So in this case, we are going to use a GUI, a graphic user interface, and we do that by calling the auth config. All right. So that auth conf, which we installed, the packages which we installed earlier on. So that is what we're going to use. So what we're going to do is just, since we installed the package, we can easily call up that package here. We just put auth config. Um, Hold on. I know I'm missing something here. Mm, what does it say here? It says auth config help. Okay. So we're going to type auth config GUI. That's just the reason why it was telling us that, giving us that issue there. Um, So yeah, let's see. It gave us quite a couple of options here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. So use auth-config -tui, and then that should pull up this. So when it pulls up since we're configuring using the GUI, it pulls up this kind of graphic. So we're going to put a star here and say use LDAP, all right? And then we'll come here and put a star here. There's nothing there, so we're going to put a star and say use LDAP authentication, all right? So that is, you need to tick those two because you're using LDAP. So we go to next. Yeah, I say use TLS. There's nothing there, so we're going to put a tick to us there as well. So use TLS. And what you will need to specify here is you need to specify your LDAP server, right? You need to specify your LDAP server, and you're going to specify like this. You use LDAP, and you say you want it to connect to LDAP. So you specify your LDAP server, right? Dot hop2.org. And then down here, what you will need to specify is you need to specify your DC and your DC, your distinguish your domain controllers and all of that. So you have to say DC, you need to be hop2, and you put a comma, and you put a DC, you put it equals to, and you put that. So when this is done, always make sure everything is looking correct as it's supposed to be. If not, we might run into some issues here. Okay, and then we see here it's telling us that, oh, it did something, and it says, and look at where it's actually looking for the certs, right? So we might need to send those certs in the same location here. And when you launch this auth-config UI, it should be able to create that location. So let's just go ahead and put those certs in that same location, right? So that we don't run into issues here. But in this case, I'm sure it usually creates that location when you do that. So in this case, let's just copy back and put it in this location. It should create it when you launch that. So you see, it's there now. So it was able to create that. So you say yes, everything looks good. You said okay. So what it's doing now is that it will do some configuration. When you do that, when you place that, it will actually modify the LDAP file. So there's actually some modifications that have been done already at this point inside the LDAP file. We can have a look at that. Let's see. So if we try to VI the LDAP file, so you see here that it came and put the URL inside here, and it has a location of the set in there. So when you do that, yeah, it just creates that for you. What else? I think that should be fine. Um, I don't think we need anything to be done at this level. You can just save this file. Okay, there are other command line. If you want to use a commander, you can still use the conf as I mentioned earlier on. But since we're using the GUI, that's why we had to specify the GUI, the auth-config hyphen TUI. Okay, since we're done now with the auth-config configuration, we need to look at the auth job, which I mentioned earlier on. So we need to use that since we need to create home directories automatically for LDAP users when they connect. So remember that when you connect, you will need to But normally, when you just connect into Linux and you do pwd, you discover that you're in your home location. But right now, those users will not exist on this server, but they will exist on the actual um, LDAP server. So we need to use that or job in order to make sure to have that. So we need to open up this file, and we can go right to the bottom of this file. We do insert, and we're going to insert a command a line here, and we will need to say palm, yes, our job. That is, since we want it to actually use that package that we already have. .so. Right? Make sure everything looks okay like this. Then we save this file. Okay. With that already in place, the next thing we do is we can start up the service. All right. We make sure that our job service is started. So I'm going to start it up. You can enable it if you want. Yeah, which is good to have it enabled. Let's check the status if it's running anyway. It's not running, so let's start it up. Start it, and let's check the status. Okay, it's up and running. Okay, so with that running, what you can do now is with all those configuration, we need to restart the SSSD service. Remember, we talked about the SSSD, one of the same packages that we had already. Let's see if it was running anyway. It was running, so we need to restart it. So we restart that. Always make sure it's back up and running. And sometimes make sure that nothing is going wrong, because I always want to use a -L to make sure everything is looking fine. Okay, now I think we're good. Everything should be, we're almost halfway. More than halfway, we're almost finished. So now what we can do at this point is we can create a user and see how we can log in as that user. So let's hop over to the Ldap server, and for example, let's create a user over there. Okay, let's do something like user add, and let's add a user here called EDB user. Okay, at the level operating system. Since we've added that user, let's log in as that user. Oops, sorry. EDB user. So we log in as that user. We'll create a password for that user. Passwd. And this is just an LDAP password, so that which will be able to. So now that we've created a user in the LDAP server itself. Note this is an LDAP server. Let's hop back um, to 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 a database server. Or we can call it a client server for now. What we need to do here is we need to add that particular user to the LDAP database. All right. And in order to do that, if we hop back over here, I'll do an ID. I'll see, okay, I see I'm connected as that user, and it's 101. So here, what I'm going to do is I can VI a file, basically because we want to add that user. I can just call it edb user.ldif, and oh, sorry. Oof. And I will need to add So I'm specifying the home, and this is where I need to change this key. And I need to grab the key which I used earlier here. I need to grab this key, and I go back here, and I will need to change this key. So I need to change that. That's one of the things. Not all of the things. Whatever we're doing here, we can as well change that and do that on the command line. So since I've created that, optionally, I can also create a group, which is up to you if you want. But let's just go ahead and create a group. So I can VI, I can put groups. I can say group EDB dot LDF, and I put that in there. So I specify that I'm creating a group, and you know, let's see, and EDB user. Yeah, I can just leave that there. That's fine. And now, what do we do? Next is we add that user into the Ldap database. Note that I'm in a different, and this should work even though I'm in a remote server. So I'm actually adding this user remotely. So this command will connect to the remote server in order to add that user to that. Can't it say it cannot contact the Ldap server. Um, Something is wrong. Why can't you contact the Ldap server? Let me see. System CTL. Let me check if the firewall is running. Let me stop the firewall here for now. But note in your environment, you might need to leave open up this. Let me stop the firewall here, and I'm going to stop the firewall as well on the Ldap server. And let's check to see if that should be able to contact the Ldap server. Okay, let's go back here, and let's run the same command again. This time around, we hope that it goes. Okay, good. Now we see it was able to contact the Ldap server, and it was able to add that user. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add the group. So remember we created a group already here. I put it at group EDB, so I will need to change this to group EDB. Was it EDB? Yeah, group EDB. Okay, so that has been added to as well. Okay, so how do we validate to make sure everything is looking good as it's supposed to be? We can run an Ldap search to see the users that are in the Ldap database. There's the Ldap search. You can run that. And definitely we're able to see a user EDB user there, which we added. Okay. And then remember we added one earlier on, which was Benson. That user too was there. So we're able to see when we run an LDAP search, we're able to see those users in the LDAP database. So everything is looking good. Okay. Now, note something here that this user which I have created here, the user is created over here. Remember I created the user in the Ldap server. That user does not exist on this server. Let me try something to log in. EDB user. It says for some reason the user does not exist. Um, let's see. Let me see if let me restart SSD and let me try to connect again. Okay, you see? So now we're able to, so I just restart the SSD service and we're able to connect as the EDB user. Note that this EDB user is not on this server. we created that user on the LDAP server. So that connection is just going on because now it's been authenticated remotely. So this is not here. So it created the home directory for that user. And that's why when we do PWD, we're able to see a home directory for this user, even though this user does not exist on this server. All right. So it's connecting remotely. So we could see that LDAP authentication is working perfectly fine. So with that said, now last steps will be to install Postgres. All right, we're going to run the installation of Postgres on this server, and we see what we can do to connect. So I'm going to exit as B as root, and I'm going to run the installation of Postgres packages. And I'm going to also run the EDB repo so that it creates my EDB repo file for me. Okay. With that said, I will need to uh, edit the EDB repo file. So I will need to edit the EDB repo file because I need to install Postgres. And okay, so here I need to, it's kind of a little bit, I need to put some my passwords and stuff. You need to edit this file and make sure it looks okay. Edit it with your password, your user's name and your password. All right. Okay. That's very important. So in this case here, I will not be able to edit that with my actual password live. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pause the video and I will resume it while after editing and putting my password. Okay. Okay. So what happened was since I just changed that file, so just change that. So the next thing is you will need to install Postgres. So we're just gonna run you. We're gonna install PostgreSQL 12. For some reason, uh, it's rejecting that. Um, okay, let's see. Uh, there seems to be something wrong somewhere. Um, let's see why. Okay. Anyway, I just got that encrypted, so that should be fine. Just got that encrypted, so that should be fine. I will I will just put that up and I will change the password. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, so it looks like they had a wrong password there. So yes, so we're installing Postgres. So when we're done with the Postgres installation, we're going to just do a test. So yes, go ahead and install that. Okay, that's fine. And when Postgres installed, it installs with a user comes Enterprise DB. So let's switch as that user. And let's just go ahead and create a bash profile. It creates a bash profile here, but I want to do away with this bash profile so that I will create mine. So I just truncated that bash profile, and I will populate it with my own bash profile. So have this bash profile, saying connecting to EDB and everything. Looking okay. Let's save that. I can decide to source this bash profile. That is fine. And I can cd to the PG data database location. So see here. Okay. So one thing we have not done is initialize Postgres. That's why we don't have any files here. So I'm just going to exit and I'm going to run initdb. So that should initialize and populate this data directory. So if I log in back and go back here, as you can see where I am, if I list it now, I should be able to see all the files there. So um, I think yeah, we need to start up Postgres server. Sorry, we need to just exit back and systemctl start edb, start the service, check if it's running. Oops, sorry, typo there. Okay, service is running. So let's log in back as enterprise DB and let's go to data directory. So we have the VI, the PGHBA. That's the host-based authentication file. And to test this connection, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to comment everything that's here so that you really see that we have LDAP working. I'm just going to comment out this and I'm going to insert my LDAP connection information here. So what you're seeing here is that I'm specifying, anyway, those of you who know Postgres, you should know definitely what this file is for. It just specifies when you want to authenticate to a particular server, it takes care of validating that. So what we're seeing here is that I'm specifying that okay, it should come from any IP, but it should be, has authenticated by LDAP, and I specify the location of the Ldap server, which is right there, Ldap host, and it's actually running on this IP. If we go to the Ldap server itself, if we go to the Ldap server, we do host name minus I, we're going to see that this is the IP address of this Ldap server, the Ldap server we have. So here I'm directing the connection to authenticate through the Ldap server and is using that default Ldap port, and I'm saying it should use TLS connection, security connection, you know, specifying all my organizational unit and all of that information in the Ldap server. So it's kind of really secure connection here. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to reload. So I reload that file. Okay, now that I've reloaded the file, I will need to test my connection. Um, and remember, I created an LDAP user called EDB user. And remember, we created the user, this EDB user. It's in the LDAP database, right? So it's in the LDAP database, but it is that user is not in so if we kind of look, if I do like this, I can be able to connect because I'm connecting as with user. Here I just connected as, if I do select user, I've just connected as user enterprise DB. But I want this connection to be secure. Okay. I need the connection to be secure. So if I run PSQL and then I specify -h, and then I specify this same host. This same host where I am, because this is where the database is running LDAP, and then I specify the database, which is EDB, and the user I specify to be EDB user, because this EDB user is in the LDAP database. Now, if I press enter, this is going to ask me for the password, which I will give the password. But the problem here is that it tells us that the role EDB user is not found. Even though this user is in the LDAP database, that means it has gone over to the LDAP server to authenticate, and the authentication the LDAP server worked. It was able to get to the LDAP server and verify that user. But when returning back to the database itself, which is EDB running on this server, it didn't find this user. So that's why it's saying the role does not exist. So let's go ahead and create that role. Let's just log in as normal enterprise DB user, and let's create user EDB user. I'm just going to give it super user privilege, but it's not, you must not do that. This is just a test box. Now that I have a user, the EDB user created in the database, now if I try to run the connection, it asks me for that. And now I'm able to connect. So this is what we call secure connection um, 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 with Postgres and with LDAP. So now, if we look at this now, if for example, I connect to the database and then I create another user, and if I call that user Yerima, right? This is a user I've created, Yerima. If I try to log in as that user Yerima, look at it. If I try to log in as that user Yerima, this logging needs to be LDAP authenticated. If I do this, it will ask for the password. Now look at this. The password I'm even putting, because when I created this user, I didn't specify any password. So normally the password needs to be the password of other database. But if I press enter, look at what it gives. It says that LDAP authentication failed for that user. That means it was not able to authenticate to the Ldap server. So this user needs to first of all get authenticated to the Ldap server. Okay, now how do we go ahead to do that? So what we're going to do first is we will add this user in the Ldap server. Okay, so let's go over to the Ldap server here and let's add that user. Let me just do user add Yerima. So with that user added, I can log in as that user, and then I will generate a password for that user. I'll put a password. This password is just to generate a hash, and this hash is what I'm going to be is what I'm going to use to create to kind of add that user. So let me log back over here, and what I'm going to do here is that remember we added a user already. I'm just going to use a sample of that same file. Okay, this is the same sample file we use in adding a user and a group. All right. So if we cut this EDB, this is what we just use. We're just going to edit this one. All right. We just use that as our template. Okay. So I'm going to copy the EDB user, and I'm going to call it yerima.ldif. So in this sense now, I'm going to edit Yerima, and instead of me editing it one by one, I'm gonna just use the SID minus I. Then I'm gonna use EDB user. I'm gonna put Yerima G Yerima. Okay, so now if I open up the file, everything should have been changed to Yerima, which looks good. And that's fine, But okay, now the UID here, I might need to, let me just rush over here and check. Connected here as Yerima, I do ID. It says screen 102. I need to change that too as well. So let me change this to 2. And I'm good. All right, it's fine. I can save this file. So this is my file to add that user that to the LDAP database. Even with the user, the group too as well, we can decide to copy that and we put it, group yerima.ldif. It's okay. So we can put group. Then we just edit this here since we have just one entry here. Put it here to be Yerima and I'm just gonna put this to be Yerima. That's fine. It's optional, so it's fine. So now with all of this set up now, I need to add that user. Since I have the 2 files there, right? Since I have the users, I have the user to be added and I have the group to be added. So I can add it now to the LDAP server. Okay. So I can use the same LDAP add and I specify the user and then I add. It's been added. So if I want to add the group itself, I can go ahead and it's just the group, right? And that one too has been added. So if I look inside the LDAP database, I should be able to see, remember we ran Ldap Search earlier. Ldap Search, yeah, I think this one. We should be able to see that we have the users added in the Ldap database. It looks okay. Now that we have that added, the next thing is let's try to connect back as that user again. Remember we ran this query to connect earlier and it refused. So right now let's see if it's going to let us in. So we put the password. Right now it is going to connect to the Ldap server, authenticate it, and then connect back to the database. So you see, so everything looks good now. So that's how we can add a user to the Ldap server, right? And then when we add the user to the Ldap server, we create the user in the database. When you're creating in the database, you don't need to put a password. Just leave it empty. Just say create user this, and that's it. But when you're adding that user to the Ldap server, you need to add the database. And remember, what I did here is that I was supposed to use the user's hash to put in that file. I didn't use that because it was the same password. That's the reason why it's gonna. I used the same password, so it kind of hashed the same thing. So basically, you just need to have that same user in the LDAP server, and then you create the user in in the database, and you should be good to go. Even when you have this set up, let's say I'm on a client server. Let's say this is an empty server. I don't have any client packages installed here. I don't have anything installed on this server. Nothing is running on this server. All right. I can still connect to LDAP. Now, note here, what is going to happen here is that the database is running here, and this is the LDAP server. So if I'm using the client machine here, what is going to happen is my main goal is to connect to this database here. So if I issue a connection to this database, it will first authenticate here before coming back and connecting here. Why I'm here. So on this server, let me try to attempt a connection, right? So in this case now, let me do PSQL, and then I put -h. Now I need to specify where the database is running because that is where I need to connect, right? It's running in LDAP epars.hub2.org, right? And then I'm going to specify the database, which is EDB, and then the user, and let me just connect as Yerima. So if I hit enter, it's first of all going to tell me that PSQL is not found. Why? The reason is just because the PSQL packages are not installed. So whenever you want to use your client machine to connect, just make sure that to connect to a remote server, just make sure you have, let's say on a Linux machine, just make sure you have the client packages installed. Okay, so here I will need to install the client packages. And before I install the client packages, I'll need to, you know, just get the Postgres API release. I need to install the API release and the EDB repo. So now I install the EDB repo. Mm. So when I get that installed, uh, the last package is kind of okay. It got installed. So I just gonna modify the password and then I'm just gonna install Postgres 12. Uh, Now the Postgres 12 installation I'm doing here is not like I'm not going to configure anything here. All I want is just the client packages. That's all I need from this Postgres. I'm not going to initialize it. I'm not going to configure anything here. I just wanted to install me just the packages. That's all. The PSQL package. All right. So that's just the reason why I'm installing this, just because I want to use PSQL. All right. Okay. Okay. So with this installed now, let me try to run my connection to that server now. You see? So now it's asking me that if I do put the password, now I'm able to connect. So so the reason I just installed that was just to make use of the PSQL. Okay, so now you see here that my connection is secure. Even though I'm connection from client machine, I'm able to cross two servers. So I'm able to go through, first of all, get authenticated to LDAP, and then from the LDAP, it goes over to the Postgres server for connecting. So this is just a test to show how we installed and configured LDAP on Linux and how we test the configuration. So I hope you all enjoyed this. And in case of, because we kind of went faster, because if we tried to explain every detail of everything we had in the configuration, it kind of take us time, and we will need to break this demo into multiple pieces, which I kind of just wanted it to be on one. So, if you have any comment or anything, just let me know. I think we come to the end of our demonstration here. Thank you. Bye.